Classical music. People think listening to it can turn you or your baby into a super genius, but unfortunately, according to science, that isn't true. So why even bother listening to classical music? Surely, stuff written hundreds of years before Shiny perfected music in 2009 is completely irrelevant to us in the modern day, right? Wrong. I'm Umu, and I'll be your guide as we explore how classical music has influenced today's top hits and how it can be enjoyed as much in 2024 as it was in 1824. People often ask me, are there any similarities at all between classical music and K-pop? Yes, there are. Things we take for granted in modern pop music, like a song being in a certain key or having a certain chord progression, all originated in classical music. But there are also more specific similarities, like what we call sequences. Today, I'm meeting with expert piano nerd Kevin Wang to further explain these similarities. Oh. What are sequences?
The easiest way to explain sequences in layman's terms is sort of little groups of patterns that repeat with slight shifts in pitch that are usually like half a bar long. For example, there's like this motion where it goes da dee da dee dee dee.
So that's the sequence.
This definitely happens in pop music as well. For example, in Stray Kids, and you notice how that last chord felt a little bit different. It's like a little bit surprising. It like heightens the mood. That's because they kind of freely break away from the sequence.
Gotcha. Is there any other way that pop music has taken from classical music?
Yes. Let me take you back to the beginning of music. Western music, even before music was written down, music was very simple when it first started. But around 600 years ago, they decided to add thirds to this rather blank fifth texture, which they've been experimenting with for hundreds of years. And then that directly impacted the rest of music all the way up until pop now, which is the basic way of stacking thirds to make triads. We've heard that in the Apple opening music. When the Macintosh, you know what that is.
Oh, yeah.
That's a major triad. Then we have a minor. Ooh. It's a little bit sadder, a little more somber. But then, if we wanted to get even more colorful, which of course we did, we decided, well, what if we just stacked minor thirds on top of one another? How that would work is, sounds like a minor chord. Yeah.
Pop music does that?
Pop music can do that. Sometimes we get a really good example, such as Shiny's Don't Call Me.
Where on earth?
The opening, actually. See? If you ever thought, why does that sound so unstable?
Yeah, I thought they were just keyboard smashing.
Right, exactly. It's not just a cluster. Beep. It's a diminished chord.
So if you like these sounds in K-pop, there's a chance that you might like them where they originated, in classical music. Now, when it comes to starting to listen to classical music, we think it's important to just take the dive. We use Apple Music Classical. Here is where you can start your classical music journey. But how do you know which pieces to even start listening to? Okay, so say that I am a classical music noob. Mm-hmm. I don't even know how to even start listening to classical music. How should I approach which piece I listen to first?
Well, you can approach it by vibe.
I feel like naming different vibes, and then you tell me whether classical music has that vibe or not.
Okay.
Okay, so like up first, let's say I'm really, really depressed.
I get it.
You know, sometimes you're going through a really hard time in your relationship, and you want to turn on like the side girl pop music. But does classical music have something?
Absolutely.
Oh.
Classical musicians are all depressed in my eyes. So I'm really partial to Tchaikovsky's 6, Movement 1 or 4.
Wow, I think I'm gonna have to go back to my place and get a good cry while listening to those pieces.
Yeah, it makes sense for you.
Oh. Well, I mean, sometimes I just need to drown out my emotions, right? And sometimes you just need a good banger to get you out of bed, twerking out on the street. And that is something that I, like, no way classical music has bangers.
No, definitely there are. You can throw it back to Rimsky-Korsakov's Scheherazade, Movement 4, real banger.
So at this point in this storyline that I'm thinking of right now, I broke up with my boyfriend. I needed to get some emotions out. I needed to get energized, and now I'm at the point where I'm craving some empowerment. I need some badass soundtrack to, you know.
Girl boss.
Girl boss.
Girl boss.
Girl boss. I need girl
Gatekeep.
boss. Yeah.
Gaslight.
Yeah.
Prokofiev's The Enemy God and the Dance of the Spirits of Darkness.
That's no way. That's the actual.
Yeah, it was really hard memorizing that.
So now in the storyline, I'm imagining my character. She has all the free time in the world. She's newly single. She wants to delve into lore. Like K-pop has a ton of lore. I like K-pop because of its lore. But does classical music ever have lore? Or like,
Absolutely. Classical music has some of the best storytelling. Do you like art museums?
What if I said no?
Say yes.
Yes.
Mussorgsky has a wonderful piece called Pictures at an Exhibition, and it's actually based off of experience walking through an art museum, and each movement is based off of a specific piece that he saw.
Wow, I felt like I was transported into an art exhibit. But what about just classical music that's good vibes only?
Well, I would say you can do Libiamo negli calici from the opera La Traviata.
And if we didn't recommend something that fits your vibe, our favorite classical music streaming app has Music by Mood playlists where you can further discover classical music that will fit whatever mood you are currently in. Apple Music Classical is a classical music streaming app for Apple Music users that makes exploration of classical recordings, composers, periods, and instruments more accessible. So this app is showing me that I can choose which classical song I want to listen to by instrument. But how would I know which instrument to pick?
Well, you listen to a lot of pop music, right?
Yeah.
And you know, some of them feature classical instruments.
No way!
Yeah, so most of the instruments that you hear are actually used in the classical orchestra.
Like what?
So have you heard the French horn, Super Junior, Burn the Floor?
There's a lot of stuff going on in that song. Which one?
Towards the ending, where it goes. You know,
Now I do.
Yeah, that's the French horn. A lot of these examples come in classical music. So, for example, you can do Strauss's Der Rosenkavalier.
What do the horns sound like in that one?
I would say the most powerful of classical instruments would be the organ. I'm sure, no, not internal organs.
Can you describe, like, where would I have heard it in pop music?
In pop,
Or K-pop?
Taste by Stray Kids.
Okay.
If you've heard the, just a sound where it goes, bah!
Oh my God! Okay, and I'm guessing classical music sounds like that too.
Yes, yeah, there's a lot of classical examples that go, like the Josef Rheinberger.
Yummy? Burger?
No, but Rheinberger.
With all the bits and pieces we played for you today, I hope we have been at least somewhat helpful introducing the classical music world to you. Of course, there are a lot of topics that we have yet to cover, but while you are waiting for part 2 of this series, I honestly think the best way to start your classical music journey is through Apple Music Classical. They've got almost everything that a classical music rookie listener needs. An example being musical guides called The Story of Classical that teach you about every single musical period.
The experience listening to classical music on Apple Classical can't be replicated on any other app. Not only do they have the highest audio quality available, they even offer an immersive multi-dimensional spatial audio that transports you to the best seat in the concert hall for an ultimate audio experience.
If you're an Apple Music user and are interested in Apple Music Classical comes at no extra cost. But if you're new to Apple Music, you can still get 1 entire month for free to test things out. Head over to our description box for a link to download Apple Music Classical today. Next time, we'll answer your biggest questions. How do you listen to 40-minute long symphonies without falling asleep? What is Romantic period? And what are the top 5 feuds in classical music history? What are the top 5 feuds in classical music history?
Feuds or fugues?
Feuds.
Feuds?
That's an answer for the next episode.